Hello and welcome to another edition of Brilliant But Lazy. I'm Alan.
I'm Josh. Good morning. I'm super tired, but I'm stoked to talk about some classic Marvel non-MCU movies with you. This has been a long time coming.
Absolutely. Yes, it has. We've been talking about this since we started the show. So exciting that the Watcher just fell behind me.
Yeah, he doesn't want to watch this.
He does not. He's like, no. We ended this franchise for a reason. Today we're gonna be deep diving into. We're gonna start our exploration of the Fox Marvel films. Jumping around a little bit out of order because we've been talking about this main film for a while now, which is the director's cut of 2003's Daredevil, starring Ben Affleck and Jennifer Garner. So we're gonna, as we build up to Deadpool and Wolverine, we're gonna go through all of the Fox Marvel films, or at least most of them, and explore what we think of those films. Because some of these we haven't seen in years, some of these we've never seen. But today we're gonna be talking about Daredevil and Elektra. So
Yeah. And we're on a time limit today because
Yeah.
you got a hard out in about an hour. So we're not going to be deep diving into all of this. But remind me again, have you've seen Daredevil? Did you watch the Daredevil's director's cut for this,
I had seen the theatrical cut of Daredevil before. I had never seen the director's cut. I watched the director's cut for this after
Good.
at least 18 years of not seeing the Daredevil films. The Daredevil film. So,
Well, and this movie came out 21 years ago. So, spoiler warning, we don't have time to pussyfoot around this stuff. We're gonna be dropping straight into this. If you haven't seen Daredevil 2003, I don't know what to tell you. But yeah, on these retro reviews, are we still giving our rating?
I think so. I think that's something we need to keep doing to keep it consistent on the show. So,
Okay. Well, since it's a retro review, we're going to jump straight into trailers. Let's just keep that to the end. But
sounds good.
So you watched the director's cut. Did you remember things and then notice changes in this, or has it been so long that you didn't really notice changes, or what?
There were a few things that I noticed different. Things that I was like, I didn't know. I didn't know Coolio was in this. Why didn't I remember that? There was a lot more Foggy Nelson than I remember. And there were scenes missing that I was like, oh, I thought they did stuff. I guess they don't in this one. So I noticed a few changes. But overall, like, I couldn't really tell much, but it got to a certain point where I'm looking at the different versions list on IMDb and making sure that things in the director's cut are happening. So I know that I'm watching the right version, because I wanted to watch the director's cut and I have it on Blu-ray. So I was like, did I make sure I hit the right button? Did it have both versions? But it was just the director's cut. So.
Well, this is how I knew I was a nerd growing up. I loved movies like what am I trying to say? It's a Tom Cruise movie, lawyer show. Not All the Right Men. Oh my God, what's the Tom Cruise?
A Few Good Men.
Few Good Men. Yeah, I loved legal dramas. Like, that was just my thing. I wanted to be an attorney growing up, and so when they teased the director's cut of Daredevil, and I think one of the commercials was like, more courtroom drama, I was giddy. Like, I was like, yes, let's see Daredevil in the courtroom more. And that's what this was. There's like a whole courtrooms, sub-story that's in this that was cut from the original. There's a little more violence in this, a couple more, little short scenes of Colin Farrell in here. And there is a missing sex scene that was in the theatrical cut. Instead, he is more focused on what he needs to do, and he's more of a gentleman, and he doesn't get the girl in the director's cut, which is interesting because in other director's cuts, they're clearly not director's cut. We're going to talk about Elektra a little later. There's a couple seconds added on or a couple lines that were cut, but it isn't a director's cut. That's just something they slapped on to sell more DVDs. But this actually was, and there's actual substance added and changes made, and so I always appreciated this, and I thought it did make for a slightly better film.
Yeah, I'm intrigued by the idea of director's cuts because a lot of the times it's a superior version of the film. Like I think Batman versus Superman, the ultimate cut, is my favorite example of director's cuts completely changing the film, because you had Batman and Superman in that movie, but Superman's kind of put off to the side and doesn't really have a plot in the theatrical cut. In the ultimate cut, he does, and it makes the movie so much better. And for like movies that are standalone, it works a lot better than something in like the MCU. Like I don't think there's never going to be a director's cut of anything in the MCU because they have to stick to canon.
Right.
And it's harder to do that when you have two different versions of the film, which one really happened. So,
but I have a special place in my heart for Daredevil, 2003. I think it was interesting. Ben Affleck, he's done everything. He's played Superman, he's played Batman, he's played Daredevil. What did you think of him as the blind lawyer from Hell's Kitchen?
I liked his Matt Murdock. He definitely looks the part. Because young Ben Affleck really, I don't see him as like in this time period, he wouldn't have worked as Batman as well as he did in Batman v Superman and the Zack Snyder stuff. But he works as Matt Murdock. He's a younger lawyer. He plays blind pretty well. He's got that smug charm to him. And he's got the build for Daredevil. Like he's not super scrawny like you expect Spider-Man to be, or super bulky like you'd expect somebody like Superman to be. But he's got the build for it. He brings a lot to Matt Murdock in this. Yeah,
I agree. I liked him in this role. I really did. Yes, there's some corny elements to this movie for sure, but there was, in 2003 there were some awesome moments to this movie for sure. So
yeah. The thing of it is, like he is such a fan of this that it comes through in his performance, and I think a lot of the issues from this movie are we're still in the early 2000s, so the superhero genre hasn't really established itself as to what's good superhero movies and what's not. Like this movie took a lot of lessons from the Batman films and not necessarily the good ones up to this point, because it's still pre-Nolan. Yeah. This is
pre-Nolan. Yeah.
This you can see some influence from the Joel Schumacher Batman films in here, for better or worse. So.
And I'm looking up the director. I kind of recognize some of the movies he did. He also directed Ghost Rider 2007. So they gave him another shot at a comic book movie. But before this, I'm trying to see what he did before Daredevil that landed him this role.
And I will say that this and Ghost Rider are not the worst offenders of this early 2000s Marvel films. Like they're okay for what they are. They're not the best. They're not the worst. They are a product of their time.
Well, according to IMDb, the only movie he had directed before this was Simon Birch, and I kind of remember that movie, but barely. So that's an interesting choice to jump from that kind of drama to this. But yeah, this movie had a lot going for it in terms of putting in characters that we know and love from Daredevil's story. It had Joe, how do you pronounce his last name? Panatolino?
Joey Pants. Pantaleon.
Joey Pants. Yeah, from from The Matrix and from other from Sopranos, and I've been rewatching The Sopranos. Well, not rewatching, watching for the first time lately, and he's a regular in that show, and I'm like, oh yeah, he likes steak and wants to go back into The Matrix.
Yeah.
But he's in this as Ben Urich. We got Karen Page is in this. We got Foggy Nelson. We've got a lot of characters in this, which is kind of surprising. I forgot that we had those.
It's surprising. It's surprising that this is Ellen Pompeo before Meredith Grey.
Yeah, I know.
Just barely, just by like a few years.
Just barely. Yeah, because she's been doing it for what, 2 decades now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They throw a lot of comic book characters in here. A lot of comic book creator names too. Like that was the one thing that stood out to me, is like everyone who shows up in this is like a comic book creator, like Kirby or it's insane how many names that they drop from like the artists and writers of the Daredevil comics.
I think even Frank Miller has a cameo in there somewhere, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
Somewhere in the movie. The one thing that is, and I know we haven't mentioned Kingpin yet. We'll get to that because he's definitely a big part of it. But there is no Stick in this Daredevil, which we'll talk more about Stick later. But how do you feel about the lack of the Stick element in this?
Having not known the Daredevil, this was my introduction to Daredevil as a character. Watching the film originally, I didn't know Stick was a thing when I first watched this, so it works without Stick for me. They do a good job of establishing that he did a good job of training himself to a point, and it doesn't really rely on him having that mentor of Stick to help train him. I think they do a good job of doing the origin story without Stick. Knowing what I know now about Daredevil and the Stick relationship, it seems a little bit odd, but when I was looking at the cast list for Elektra, I was like, oh, Stick's in that.
Yeah.
I was like, that's an interesting choice.
Yeah, he's got a big part in Elektra. It was very much Spider-Man 1, which came out a year before this, very much that, like there was no trainer. Is just once the character got abilities, they started playing around on rooftops and eventually learned how to fight. So but yeah, I mean, it's a different time in comic book lore storytelling, and they had limited time on TV on screen to really build that up. But so that was forgivable for me as a kid. But I mean, the reason why it was so forgivable was because you had this monster of a villain. I mean, the great Michael Clark Duncan playing Kingpin. There's always the conversation of when they change a character, that's typically one race or one gender or one something in the comics, and they change it for movies. I don't think anybody had a problem with Michael Clark Duncan playing this role, because he's just this beast of a guy. He's a formidable presence. His voice is just like, oh my God. Like he was perfect for this role. I loved him in this role. He's a highlight for sure.
He absolutely is. Like I gone too soon. I miss Michael Clark Duncan showing up in things, but he nails Kingpin. Like he is such a great Fisk. And I think Vincent D'Onofrio does a good job now. But for the early 2000s, I think Michael Clark Duncan against this Daredevil, I think, is perfect. I mean, he's such a powerhouse, and that like he looks the role. He's menacing. The director's cut does a better job of showing how menacing he is. But yeah.
If I were just going off the Google cast list, I would never talk about Colin Farrell because he is not listed in the cast on Google. I wonder if somebody's paying Google to be like, hey, forget that Colin Farrell was in this movie. But he is in this movie as Bullseye. What did you think of his interpretation of Bullseye in this film?
It's a choice. It's definitely a choice. He's guilty of, like when I talked about the Schumacher influences, he's who I'm talking about. Like he took all the wrong lessons from that. Like he's throwing his leather coat around like it's a cape. It's just very bizarre.
Yeah. The fast cuts with his eyes and everything.
Yeah.
He's like crazy eyes all the time.
Yeah. It's hard to remember 2003 when he was like the newest thing. Like this is like one of his first big roles, and he's gone from this to Banshees of Inisherin in the last 20 years, which is impressive.
Right.
But yeah, it's comical. It's very comical.
I mean, anytime he's on screen, I always wondered, like, are they playing the music like on set? Because it just seems like he's just in it, the music there is always just pumping him up, and it's some, Irish outlaw song or something like that. And, and it just seems like, I just wonder if he's just like, if they're just blaring that through the speakers on set too. So he's just living it up with that. But he's definitely over the top. But he's just the crazy chaotic factor on screen. It's the cool, calm, powerful Kingpin calling in the wild card. And I enjoyed the difference in those two. The fight scenes between him and Daredevil, especially at the church. Again, that's an iconic thing of Daredevil in the church, and that that shot of him holding onto the cross and bleeding and everything. Like that's very much from the comics. I love that.
Having grown up Catholic, Daredevil was an easy sell when I wanted to rent it at Blockbuster. Like, Mom, he's Catholic too.
He's Catholic. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I have some notes. I'm looking to see if there's anything we haven't talked about yet that I want to. Let's talk about Elektra a little bit in this. Because the first thing I noticed was like when in her first scene when she comes in, her eyes are so green, and then they're never that green again.
Yeah, and that is a thing that goes back and forth in the Elektra movie as well. They mess with the color of her eyes a lot. So I have the Frank Miller Elektra run in comics, but I never really got into Elektra growing up, or at least I didn't read a lot of her. So I wonder, is that like a big thing in the comics that her eyes are super green or something?
Yeah.
Or what?
It was very weird, and every time she was on screen, I looked to see, are they green this time? Are they green? But what's fun, like watching them meet each other and have that fight in the playground. I was watching this with my wife, and I said, and that, kids, is how I met your mother. Like, imagine being their kids and watching this years down the line. Like, oh, so this is like the first thing that you guys did together. It's a fight scene in a playground. Why?
Yeah. The whole meet cute thing in the coffee shop, with him asking for the honey or something, and she's like, "What are you, effing blind?" And he's like, "Yes, actually, I liked it." Jennifer Garner was kind of the new hip gal in the block. She's 2 years into Alias at this point, and Alias in its prime was just this badass, female Mission Impossible style show on TV that I just loved. I loved it from the first episode. That was weekly viewing for me, and it was all her. Like, she sold that shit. So when they cast her as Elektra, there was a lot of people that are like, yeah, because she's doing it every week on ABC or whatever channel it was.
It was ABC.
Yeah, so she got the. She seemed well into like the fight choreography and stuff. She didn't get a lot in this movie, and for as action packed as her sequel is, she seemed more naive in this in Daredevil than trained and everything. And I guess that's how they kind of retcon that in her movie, is that she then went to get training, or to get more discipline or something like that. But she was definitely naive in this movie. But I did I liked how Daredevil gets a little framed and everything, and then she doesn't. She has to decide whether or not to go after him and everything, and I liked that little lovers quarrel, and meanwhile Bullseye's just being chaotic in the background, and loving it, and it was fun. It was fun between them for sure.
It was. The weirdest thing with the Elektra Daredevil relationship is the Evanescence montage when she's like training, and it's Amy Lee singing when it's Elektra, and when they cut to Matt Murdock, it's the guy, and the lines of the song are, "All this time I couldn't believe I couldn't see." And I was like, really? Like, that's the moment you're going to cut to him?
That was like, some editor in the room. Like, this is the line I know from the song. It's perfect. It's perfect. It writes itself.
Yeah.
Any other big notes from this, or big things you wanted to mention?
I was surprised that there was a Fight Club joke in this, because this was 2003. Fight Club had just come out in 99, so I think I don't realize how big of an impact that had in pop culture at the time.
What was the Fight Club joke? I can't remember.
It was in the coffee shop scene where Foggy's like, "What's that cut on your face?" Like, "Oh, I'm in a Fight Club, but I can't talk to you about it." And Foggy's like, "I haven't seen that movie. I'm going to just assume that was a good joke." So I was like, yeah. I like Jon Favreau in this. I'm glad there was more Foggy than I remember in this director's cut. So,
yeah, because this is let's see, Iron Man came out in 2010. So no, Iron Man came out in 2008. So this is a good solid 5 years from release, but 5+ years when they were filming it from him directing Iron Man. So I wonder how many things were in the fire for him to assume that role at this point. If it was even in talks. Like, I know they were working on Daredevil for a while, but I can't remember how long they were working on it. But it is cool to see him have his toes in Marvel, a lot before he got on the captain's chair. So, he's always a plus.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Him and things like this. That's all I've got about this film. What do you got?
He also came out with Elf that same year.
As this?
He had a banger year. Yeah, 2003 was a good year for Jon Favreau. I don't think I have anything else. I think this is a fun movie. It was definitely a movie for its time. I think this, this fits in with when did X-Men 1 come out? I keep on looking up other films because I can't help compare it to the similar age. So X-Men 1 came out in 2000. Yeah. How'd I forget that? It was a 2000 millennial film. I felt like, I think a lot of people thought that this was, maybe a touch of a downgrade from like the X-Men films, but it's still it wasn't terrible. Yeah. I think people, big fans were, kind of upset that Elektra was killed, but then they kind of teased at the end that she wasn't killed. But I don't think, clearly it didn't do well enough to be picked up for more, but I remember enjoying it. And it overall being well received. Over time, I think people were like, oh yeah, it wasn't that great of a film. The people that I've introduced the director's cut to think there's just enough more to the film that makes it a better. I think a lot of people like to joke on this film, but when it came out, I remember liking it and other people liking it. So, it wasn't Oscar worthy or anything, and it certainly wasn't Spider-Man 1. And maybe that's why. Maybe this came out a year after Spider-Man 1, and that set a really high bar, because this was not that level. But it's like you said, it's certainly not the worst of the Marvel films of its time.
No, absolutely not. And the director's cut does make it better. because I like this more than I thought I was going to going into it from what I remember and like what happened to this character stuff afterwards. Like I enjoyed this a lot more than I expected to. So are we going to do our ratings for this one now?
Yeah. So to keep it going, what's your rating real quick?
I'm going to go brilliant, but like it's mid tier. Like there's some good here, but they're like the Colin Farrell cheesiness and then the Evanescence edits are just bizarre.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And there's other, I would say the same thing, brilliant, but there's other things too. Like it's cool when, Ben lights up the stuff on the ground to do the double D's, on fire in his eyes. But then you got to think about, okay, did Matt just like wait around with a little thing of lighter fluid and he's like, okay, I got to draw this out. And, does this look right? And get the dimensions right. And then hope nobody walks through this. And I just imagine, him just spraying that before leaving the crime scene. But I enjoyed it. Last question for this. What are your odds that Ben Affleck's Daredevil will show up in Deadpool 3?
If I was a betting man, I'd bet on it.
Okay.
Yeah. If they got back who they said they got back, I don't see him not doing it. So
I have stopped paying attention to any of the behind the scenes stuff or any of the things that have released. So if they have, rumored it or whatnot, I do not know.
I will say that there's a better chance of us seeing him as Daredevil again than we will ever see him as Batman again. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sad as that might be.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Let's talk about.
Well, moving on.
Yeah. Go for it.
We 2 years later in 2005, we got Elektra. Jennifer Garner got her own movie, which is a sequel to Daredevil. There's no Daredevil references other than the fact that Elektra died and was reborn or made it through. And if I understood the movie correctly, she then went to get training from Stick. Is that correct? Were the flashback scenes of her
know.
after Daredevil?
I
couldn't
don't
really
know.
tell it.
Because it looks like they tried to like de-age her. It's hard to tell because her hair's doing weird things. Like the bangs make her look younger than she is the whole time. So
it's the same thing they did in Alias. Yeah.
Even in the flashbacks, it's hard to tell like when things are happening. I wanted to say that she had the training before Daredevil. She died and then Stick found her body and brought her back to life and then maybe did some more training and like helped her recuperate. But
clearly she had some training before Daredevil because of the montage and everything. So maybe it's a mix of that. The whole Stick sending her away after she wipes the floor with most of his other trainees, I still felt like that was post Daredevil for some reason, because I could have swore they were talking about how she died, but I don't know. It was a little confusing timeline wise. Yeah. Clearly they weren't trying too hard to connect it. They just wanted to give her a little more screen time. So
I watched this for the first time last night. This movie reeks of contractual obligations.
It does. It really does. Yeah.
You signed a 2-picture deal.
I've seen this before. So I was excited for you to see this. That's probably what happened. And instead of getting a Daredevil 2, we got Elektra. But, I mean, that's props to Jennifer Garner's agent if that was the case. Because, again, she was more of a TV actress, in the early 2000s. And here she was doing 2 films in 2 years. So, the director for this, and even some of the cast, I noticed from other movies that this guy's done, he had come out with Reign of Fire in 2002, a film that I liked. He did the 98 X-Files movie. So he had a little more under his belt than the Daredevil director, So what did you think about the directing for this film in terms of like the fight scenes and and some of I know there was like a huge chunks of this film that's kind of grainy, and then other chunks that are like more, glossy and nicer. And what did you think of the director?
It's a very weirdly paced film. Like, you have all that action in the beginning, and then they spend a lot of time of her cleaning. And like the action slowly comes back, but there's a lot of time of just her doing ninja moves without really any action. Like, girl's gonna break into her house. Okay.
Or OCD.
Yeah.
OCD putting things on the counter. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very strangely paced film.
Yeah.
I recognize some names of characters in this, like Typhoid. But yeah, there was just some weird like choices made about like when the hand dies, they turn to dust.
Green dust with a light, like a soul leaving or something,
which is bizarre. Don't get that at all. But
I totally forgot the hand being a part of this, because when I watched it last night as well. I was waiting to see if you were going to watch it, and then post tattoo I went home and watched it, and I was like, at first I thought they were just mentioning, oh yeah, the hands even tried to kill her and they failed. And I'm like, is that all the hand is going to get? But then they were the primary villain, or at least villain organization in this film. So I was surprised that I had forgot how big of a role they played. There, we mentioned Stick is back, or Stick is not back. Stick is in this. Instead of being in Daredevil. So that was a choice, but I liked having Stick. That's lore to add to this. I don't know, again, I did not read the Elektra comics. In the Daredevil Netflix series, Stick has a history with Daredevil and develops a relationship with Elektra. I didn't know in the comics if he trained Elektra like he trained Daredevil, so I don't know how accurate that is or not.
Yeah, I don't know either. But I think bringing him into the fold here makes sense. Because if you're going to do a hand storyline, you kind of have to have Stick as part of it.
Yeah. But the storyline for this, Elektra's we're introduced to her as just an assassin. Like, I'm not sure how she went from rich girl daughter who loses her dad to straight up assassin, but it's not like you get the sense that the guy she kills in the beginning is a bad guy, but and her lore is that she died but now she's back. But she's just a paid assassin. And I looked up I watched the director's cut last night. You watched the regular cut. The changes, like we mentioned earlier, are minuscule. Like it just a slightly different shot or an extra couple lines here. It's not a crazy difference, and it probably isn't actually a director's cut. But I thought, the opening scene wasn't bad. Like, she was kind of kept in the dark for most of it. She's taking out these bad guys, and then she, sticks her sai or whatever straight through the dude's chest and through the couch, and it's kind of a cool opening. But then she's just a hired killer, and I guess what's his name is her agent, and she just goes on things to kill people now. That's all she is. Which is interesting.
It's weird that the only two characters I can remember names of are Elektra and Stick. Because it's such such a forgettable movie. Every moment of it. There's some good action in there. I think Jennifer Garner does a great job with that, but story-wise, like, are they just mutants? Like, why does everyone have powers? I don't understand what. Yeah,
the villains. You got Stone, which is played by Bob Sapp, who's always just this big dude, except this one, he's a big dude that doesn't smile. You got Tattoo. You got Typhoid Mary, which you mentioned. You had this one dude who just was playing with a coin in his opening scene, and I'm like, is this supposed to be cool? Like, he's just balancing a coin walking down the hallway, and I'm like, it looks like he's just holding a coin. Like, what is? I guess he's good with knives or something. I really didn't know what his superpower was, and he dies pretty quickly. And then you got the main bad guy who's just Kurigi. He's a ninja that moves fast, I guess. Yeah. So the hand wants you at first think that they're after the treasure, and you think that's Elektra. The film later shows that no, they're after this girl called Abby Miller, who is the treasure, and I don't know, she's got abilities or something, or she's just one in a million or something.
I'm pretty sure I went to high school with an Abby Miller, so it's such a generic name. I did read that there was a Daredevil cameo shot for this, and it got cut.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Which I think would have made the film feel a little bit more connected to anything else, but it's like one of the biggest things that I was curious about, like, is how do they bring her back to life, and why? And there wasn't really an explanation for either given to this.
Nope, they just don't. That's just her lore, is that she died, now she's back. And now Elektra has powers of foresight, and she can see the future, and we witness her die multiple times, and then she can't even be killed. Like, Typhoid Mary tries to kill her once or twice in this film, and she survives that. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of, like, next with Nicolas Cage powers in this, where she just sees a little bit into the future and then steps to the side or makes a change. I still don't really get Abby, because she clearly has had some training. She's got a special little tool. She knows a little bit how to fight, but she seems really stupid, and she's acting like she doesn't know what's going on, or she's not acting like someone on the run, like she's just like carefree. Oh, there's a new person that's moving into the house next door. Let me go, like break into their house and then just chat with her and not be afraid of potential new people that are coming here to kill me.
Yeah.
I don't really get her character.
I don't either. Like, does she have the powers, or is it the necklace that has the powers, like her chain thing? Like, I don't understand.
They didn't call her chain the treasure, and they destroyed her chain pretty quickly. Yeah. I think they were referring to her as the treasure.
Okay.
I don't know. That's the whole thing. The hand is after the treasure. They keep on sending people. Electric kills them, and then the main leader of the hand, his son, has this little gang of mutants or whatever, and they say, if we go kill her, we'll take over the hand. And the father, Roshi, is like, yes, if you are successful, you can take over the hand. So this is my only question. At the end, when they all die, and Elektra is like, Abby, you're free to live your life now. They'll never come after you again. Who said they would never come after her again? Like, the hand said that if they succeeded, that the son would rule the hand, but they failed. So why wouldn't the hand continue to go after her?
Was it like a subsect of the hand that was going after her? Like, just like you have the hand.
I thought Roshi was like the leader of the hand, unless I messed that up. I don't know.
I don't know.
I think we're reading into this movie way too much than we need to. It's not that great. It's not. I mean, there was some interesting stuff. It's clearly, Lara Croft Tomb Raider came out a couple years before this, and her mansion fight scene is definitely kind of copy pasted into this movie. There's some low-key or low-quality CGI stuff in here, and then it's just Jennifer Garner in a different outfit than her alias, kicking ass on the movie screen.
I'm kind of glad I watched this one on my own, because my wife doesn't like Jennifer Garner's acting.
Oh.
She calls it oven acting. Her impression of Jennifer Garner acting is, did I leave the oven on? I think I left the oven on. No, I turned it off. Like, that's our impression of Jennifer Garner acting. And every time she comes on screen, she's like, did I leave the oven on? So
I don't think she's that bad, but maybe I have a soft spot because I loved Alias.
I need to watch Alias. I love J.J. Abrams stuff, and I have not. That's like the big hole in that library of his early 2000s television stuff.
Well, Alias is no different than any of his other TV shows. It starts out super strong in that the first episode is probably the best episode of TV I've ever seen. It's a great episode. I love that episode. But then as the later seasons go, you can clearly tell that the writers are like, I don't know, let's do this, So it definitely falls off, like every other TV show that J.J. Abrams has been a part of. So watch the beginning. Watch the first episode if you can. Don't stream it because unfortunately, like a lot of things from that time period, if you stream it now, it's got different music and it's got different stuff. And it does hurt it.
I will keep an eye out.
I'm grateful to own.
I'll keep an eye out for the DVDs then. So
yeah, I got the box set somewhere in my house because I will never give that away.
Yeah.
But you can find it. They're always all over. Go to any GameStop and you can find it.
As you can see behind him, Josh is a big fan of physical media.
Yeah. Yeah, none of my movies are in here. But,
yeah, I mean, books count. They're physical. They're media.
Books count, right. All right, we're running out of time, so brilliant but lazy on this. What's your
lazy?
Yes, I agree. This is definitely lazy. It was fun rewatching it. It's probably the first time I've rewatched this in maybe 10 years or more, but it's just as lackluster as I remembered. But it distracted me from my tattoo last night. So
yeah. And that's medium praise for this film. It was a distraction from the pain I was experiencing. So
we're not gonna. Yeah. I mean, that was the end of Daredevil for a while. 2005. Yeah. I mean, granted, Daredevil wasn't in this, but there was another 10 years before the Netflix series came out.
Yeah.
But I had sent you a link. Did you get a chance to watch that Joe Carnahan test footage?
I did, the sizzle reel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did watch that.
So he put that out in 2012, he was trying to reboot Daredevil, and he put together this sizzle reel. For those that haven't seen it, just look up Daredevil sizzle reel or Daredevil NC-17. He did two versions of it, like a regular and an NC-17, and he wanted to do this dark, gritty, hard R 1970s New York Daredevil. And he put together a little concept reel that used footage from the 2003 Daredevil, but then spliced in a bunch of old New York stuff. And I didn't know if you'd ever seen that before, but I wanted to get your take on that. It was like a minute 40, short, sweet.
I hadn't seen it. I think it's an interesting idea. I can see why in 2012, even if Fox still had the rights, that they wouldn't want to go back to the 70s when they're trying to compete with the MCU and what they're building. If Fox was going to go into production on another Daredevil, it would have tied into the X-Men somehow. So I can see why they didn't go that route. I think it would have been very interesting to see that in the MCU, like seeing the 70s is not an era that we've explored in those films yet. So that would have been, I think it's an interesting concept to see seeing what these characters look like in 70s New York.
Yeah. I liked the idea of it. Like, he spliced in like comic panels, scenes from Daredevil, especially the pool hall scene, which is a fun scene, and then like other gangster mafia stuff from that time period. And it was, he definitely was like pushing for violence and chaos and violence galore, and throwing Daredevil in the middle of it. And I remember seeing that and just being like, oh, how amazing would this be? But we'll never get this. And then 4 years later, and we will not do a deep dive into Daredevil. If people want us to talk more about the Daredevil series, maybe we'll dedicate an episode to that.
Yeah.
But that is MCU proper. That's not going to be. That probably won't be brought up, other than maybe in a joke in Deadpool 3. But 2015, 3 years after this concept reel, we got the first season of Daredevil on Netflix. And a lot of people were like, what? Netflix has this, and I mean, I guess that means it'll never be part of the MCU. And I remember people doubting it really early, but then when it came out, it was like gold. I loved it. I thought it was brilliant.
I think.
What were your first thoughts of that Daredevil first season?
What amazes me about the Daredevil series is the casting. I think is phenomenal, from Charlie Cox as Matt Murdock, Foggy, Karen, they're all great. But Vincent D'Onofrio as Wilson Fisk, I think, is fantastic. But I think a character like this, where you have the superhero life and then the courtroom drama side of things, I think it works better episodic. And I think that's something that the director's cut of Daredevil proves, is that you can have both, but you can't fit them into a film easily. But if you can spread the story out a little bit and make it this longer, more in-depth story, it works better. And so I'm very glad that they went that route.
Yeah, and I do want to talk more about that show, but I want to be wary of your time here. But that show was great. I loved the marketing for that show. I remember when the trailer for the second season came out, and the tagline was, what was it? In the devil we trust. And I was just like, oh my gosh, they're soaking it up, and I loved it so much. It was dark, it was gritty, it was violent, it was well done. It forever claimed the hallway fight scene.
It started
and then, reclaimed it. Yeah,
it started that trend.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and then reclaimed it with every season. So I think Daredevil over the years it is interesting, because I think if most people would consider where Daredevil sits in the larger cosmos of big characters, I think he's, I love Daredevil as a character, but he is pretty far down the totem pole when you think about the Spider-Man and X-Men and the Captain America and everything. But I mean, between 2003 and the last 2 decades, he's gotten some time to develop, and I think that's pretty awesome. I think that's great. And, I've liked to see how it's evolved over the years.
It is hard for me to believe that when Daredevil Born Again comes out next year, it will have been 10 years since the first season on Netflix. That's insane to me.
I'm nervous as hell for that. I'm nervous, but I'm glad that they're
course correcting,
not being dumb. Yeah, they're course correcting, and they're not doing, I think at one point they were probably tempted to be like, let's go the Disney route and just nix everything that came before and not take advantage of, I get it. They don't want to stand on Netflix's shoulders and acknowledge that Netflix did an awesome Marvel character justice, but if you have it, why not? Why not take advantage of the success? Like, it's just going to make you money. I don't
exactly.
Might as well. We didn't talk real quick. We didn't say what's your guess on if Jennifer Garner? What's your bet if you were a betting person? Jennifer Garner's Elektra being in Deadpool.
I would, considering who the director is, Sean Levy, and his previous work on the Adam Project, which also featured Jennifer Garner, I think it's fairly certain that she will probably be in it.
Okay. I mean, we could be wrong, and they barely touch any of these other characters in that movie. I think it's half of this conversation is a pipe dream, and the other half is based on some online conjecture. But,
I feel like there's a better chance of her showing up for a cameo than there is Ben Affleck. So
yeah, well, that would be a shame though, because they're so tied together.
And I think they're friendly enough, because I just saw a picture of Jennifer Garner at Disneyland with her and Ben's kid and Jennifer Lopez's kid. So I think that they're still like a
Okay.
mixed family. So I think
Yeah.
they're like if one comes back, I think the other's going to. So I think
Yeah.
maybe
If
not.
not, there'd be some crazy jokes about
Yeah.
you know, like Deadpool saying, "Oh, we could only afford you of this
Yeah.
franchise."
Yeah.
But I would hope so. I think it'd be great.
Yeah.
So
All right.
Ben Affleck seems like he would be a personality to do it as long as it wasn't, too much for laughs.
I mean-
I loved him in the Dunkin' commercial.
I
So
was just gonna
want him to be in
say
it.
that Dunkin' coffee that he's got is fantastic. So, all right. Well, I think
Well, this
that
has been fun.
It has.
Thank you for going into this. I hope people like this because we have a lot of other Marvel stuff to go through leading up to Deadpool, and this is kind of why we're doing it because there's a chance it might be a part of that, and also because MCU is kind of on a little hiatus this year. So what other Marvel stuff can we talk about?
Exactly.
What would be next? Do you know what we would do next?
well, I think the X-Men 97 show is coming out, so it probably makes sense to do some X-Men stuff next.
Yeah.
So maybe the first X-Men trilogy, X-Men X2
Yeah.
Last Stand.
It's been a while. It's been
Yeah.
a while since. I wish. If you can't see my shirt, you can't see it. I'm cutting it out, but I'm wearing the Horrific Hope Film Festival shirt. I wish that were closer, so that me and you could just like watch one of these in person. But maybe we can get that episode knocked out before the film fest, and then watch one of these other films together, like on a late night while I'm
Yeah.
in town for that.
Yeah, we can do that.
'Cause-
Maybe
yeah.
maybe we can talk to the people at the theater and see what they'll let us do.
Yeah.
But no, that'll be fun.
I know we were talking about watching like the original Fantastic Four films as
Yeah.
well, and the other stuff from this timeline.
Well, little bit behind the scenes. You're going to be staying with me for a night, so I've got the projector. We can watch something here.
Oh yeah,
So,
that's true. That's true.
and we can
Yeah,
record
if
a
you're gonna be
episode in
around-
person.
If anyone's going to be around Winchester, Virginia on April 5th and 6th, we're going to be at the Alamo Draft House there for the Horrific Hope Film Festival. It's going to be fun. I'm excited for it. This is the third year of the film festival. You and I have been on the board for this all 3 years, but I have yet to have a chance to be there in person. And this year, I'm just making it happen. So I'm excited. I'm excited to
Yeah.
see you and not have to wait until October. But yeah, thanks for fitting me into your day. I know you got to get going. I got to get going. But
Yeah.
this was fun talking about some classic Daredevil.
Absolutely. Until next time, for Brilliant But Lazy, I'm Alan.
I'm Josh.
In the words of Dr. Fraser Crane, we're wishing you good mental health.